This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. It's talk about the Middle East, Arab Spring, Israel, Palestine, Iraq, and Iran. To help clarify a very complex and fast-moving situation is a frequent guest here, Richard Murphy, former U.S. Ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Mauritania, the Philippines, and Syria. He has served as Assistant U.S. Secretary of State for Near Eastern and Asian Affairs. He has been named a career ambassador. He's been a senior fellow at the Middle East at the Council on Foreign Relations. And Ambassador Murphy is a frequent TV commentator and widely consulted expert and a frequent guest here to talk about the region. And he's just back from the Middle East. Welcome back, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you.
Okay, last week we talked about Syria, we talked about Egypt, we talked a little bit about political Islam. Today I'd like to talk about really whether the Arab Spring, what happened to the Arab? First of all, what was the Arab Spring? Was it the wrong seasonal metaphor?
Yeah, it was too easy. Spring is wonderful, everything's turning green, and there's great, the one thing it had in spring was hope.
Right.
And it came out of a pretty bleak period in the Middle East. As different as the histories may be in North Africa, Egypt, the Levant, they had a lot in common. The youth bulge, a lot of young people without jobs, a lot of young people without much hope, a lot of young people frustrated that they had no role in decision-making in their countries and no prospect of ever getting one. So they shared that, and each one has said, well, we're a little bit different, but in fact, they did share that wellspring of discontent. We called it Arab Spring. That's a Western, maybe even an American phrase. It's not an Arab one. In fact, maybe one day we'll look back and say that it wasn't even a revolution. Maybe we've been seeing for the past year a series of coups d'états. Who knows?
So we need some perspective that time will give us.
Time will give us. There's rebellion, uprisings. Take some neutral phrase for now.
Yeah, and clearly the notion of spring with connoting of hope, clearly the outcomes have not been as felicitous as the hopes or expectations were. In fact, in some cases, the law of perverse consequences seems to have operated where, these very hopeful, initial situations have become much more dire in terms of their outcomes, Iraq being one of them, in fact.
Yep.
Now, Time magazine names named the person of the year in 2011, the protester. Was it the protester, or was it some more fundamental discontinuities in the regimes?
Well, I think what the regimes had in common was, you don't challenge me because I've got the power of life and death over you. And they would not tolerate and accommodate or compromise with oppositions. And the new guys whose names and faces we're trying to become acquainted with today have had no experience in the give and take of the rough and tumble of regular politics. Mm-hmm. They just weren't allowed to. So they're finding the problems of the economies, the problems of the birth rates, of the health situation, all problems the old regimes were dealing with, but in many cases inadequately, and now it's their turn, and there's some big problems they have to face.
Okay, we talked about Egypt and Syria and Lebanon, and last week, Tunisia seems to be a very interesting case because, in fact, the Arab Spring started with the self-immolation of the vendor that triggered this unbelievable domino effect, all these spontaneous uprisings. It was like in Europe in 1848. But that's sort of a test case, whether Islamists can be moderate, pragmatic, non-ideological, if you will, but always ideological. What's going on there? I mean, what are the prospects there? Because if the prospects aren't good there, it doesn't look good in a lot of other places then.
Well, it's been a pretty steady evolution politically in the country. The Islamists who were in exile, some of their top leaders in exile for decades, have come back, and hey, they're not as scary as the regime of Ben Ali said. So we're getting to know them now in a way and treat with them in a way we hadn't before. Time will tell, but Tunisia is a small country, small population. It doesn't have the sectarian tensions that you have in other parts of North Africa, or certainly in the Near East, on the eastern side of the Med.
Secularism and Islam seems to coexist, and certainly have coexisted for centuries in Tunisia.
Right.
So in one sense, it's a hopeful sign, but not necessarily one that might be duplicated elsewhere.
No, not necessarily.
Given unique characteristics of the area. Okay, let's go across the Red Sea, across the Maghreb, and to Israel and Palestine. You described in the Middle Eastern youth as being, seeing themselves at a dead end with no hope, etc. Does that appear to be the situation in Palestine? Sunday, June 24th, New York Times talked about the third intifada being inevitable. What's happening on the ground there?
Well, the Palestine Authority has, over the past couple of years, made significant steps ahead in building government institutions.
This is Fatah.
This is Fatah's the dominant party.
Right.
They've not had a role in Gaza, where Hamas has
right.
been
So
running
we've talked about that in the past. That split.
Yeah, that split is not helping resolve the Israeli-Palestinian confrontation. I mean, it's they have to find some way to come back together to function
as
one
what
authority.
Are the prospects? Didn't they call for unification elections?
Well, yeah,
at the end of May. That ain't going to happen.
One of these days it
might.
Will. Yeah, one of these days. But there's rivalry, there's competition, and there is a somewhat different ideology about how government should be run.
And relationships with Israel, in terms of even recognition of the fact that it should exist.
I think the fact is, we're as distant as we are from Hamas. There are voices we're now hearing from various Hamas spokesmen. They're not monolithic. A number of them have been ready for some time to come to terms with Israel and with its existence.
What about this feeling that there is this belief that it ain't going to happen, that the conversations with the Israelis is not going to lead to a separate state, that we're at a dead end and the only means to deal with this is violence, bomb, rock throwing and rocket launching?
Well, that is what's been called the Hamas line, that Israel only responds to violence, and they cite, chapters where Israel has seemed to move ahead politically more when under pressure. But, they don't have a military capability in the Palestinian side. And the young people, again, it's a pretty bleak existence for a young man, young woman in the West Bank today and Gaza today.
And the Israelis have always dominated militarily from 48 to 67 to 73.
Strange.
If you don't lose a war.
Why do you worry about accommodating if you win every time?
Do they need a Vietnam?
I hope not. there are a lot of very, very sensible, moderate, eloquent voices in Israel.
Are they in the government?
Not really, no. Not today. Not today. And they're not in the ear of the American public and the American Congress in particular. We've been attuned to hearing the voice of the right-wing leadership in Israel, and we understand it, and it's been very persuasive. But there are other voices in Israel which are trying to get the message across of we need to work with the Palestinians.
What does that mean? I mean, are there concrete proposals being offered by these critics?
Well, it's basically a more serious push for a two-state solution, which is getting less and less likely as time goes on, and the appetite in the settler side grows, even though they're a small minority and resented by many fellow Israelis.
But again, the Israeli government, you know, retroactively legitimizes these incursions. I mean, the settlement policy seems to be at the very root of the conflict, and there seems to be no backing away on the part of the Israeli government regarding these settlements. In fact, they're legitimizing settlements, really new settlements for the first time in decades.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's discouraging, and the time, it just isn't open-ended to get to a two-state solution, and yet the number of Israelis who would tolerate the idea of a one-state solution, democracy for all, equal rights for all citizens, be they Christian, Muslim, or Jewish, just that doesn't sell.
No, I mean, if I'm an Israeli, I mean, certainly the demographics being destiny, the one-state solution means that perhaps the Jews become a minority in, quote unquote, in their own country. So, I mean, the demographic argument seems to work against certainly a one-state solution. Two-state solution, how long have you were involved in negotiations in the 80s on this?
Yeah, I know, and we were pretty optimistic in the 80s. But as I look back over that period, the 80s, the 90s, I'd left government by the 90s, I can't say that I found evidence that there was a serious desire to give, in terms of a peace settlement, what was the minimum required by the Palestinians for statehood. I don't think it was there on the Israeli side.
And it's still not there.
It's not there.
So what happens?
I honestly don't know what happens there. It's I'm not comfortable with the way it's going. And a number of Israelis are not comfortable with it. There are pressures within the Jewish communities of Israel that they're uneasy about the future, but they tend to sort of sit now behind the wall, more secure than they were in years past, and that this can go on forever. Now, with the region taking a different path politically, economically, with these new authorities, they're going to be having more challenges, and the need to find a new way of relating to the Arabs is going to be greater than it's been for more than a generation.
But one of the proposals by Defense Minister Ehud Baruch just impose it unilaterally. These are the borders, and that's it. I mean, is that realistic?
Well, he said impose it unilaterally, I think, and then we can fix something, negotiate something final once we've settled down a bit.
That doesn't settle anything.
You're
right. Okay.
There are no great ideas out there.
Okay. Well, that's exactly it. There are no great ideas out there.
And the solutions to the problems have been discussed ad nauseum. Nothing that hasn't been explored. Yeah.
What has to change?
The people and the.
Oh yeah, right. Forget it. Okay, we're moving on then. What is U.S. policy now toward Israel and Palestine, and what would U.S. policy be if Obama is reelected, and what might be the policy under Romney?
I don't see American policy towards Israel changing
at all, no matter what.
No, I mean, Romney is campaigning on the slogan, everything that Obama has done to hurt Israel I would not do, or I would do it totally differently.
Yeah, and specifics?
But this is the way we go politically. We think the world is going to change when a new administration comes in. The new administration ends up being the one that changes.
Has to.
Yeah.
Okay, so but what is the policy? I mean, it's not going to change, but what is it?
It's support, certainly support for Israel, and it's the security of Israel and the peace treaties that the Israelis worked out with the Egyptians, with the Jordanians, and the hope that those can be expanded in the region.
Okay, let me just digress and interrupt for a moment. We didn't talk last week when we talked about Egypt, and that is the situation in Gaza / the Sinai. I mean, is that, there doesn't seem to be any movement on the part of the Egyptians, certainly under the military rule, to change the status quo in Sinai or Gaza.
I mean, the Egyptian military is not looking for
a fight
with Israel,
particularly in the Sinai. They have bad experience.
No, what you're seeing is the restlessness in Cairo and the attention focusing on Egyptian political change in the capital, diverting attention from maintaining the tight security that was the case with Mubarak and Sadat before.
So then you have some of these confrontations in the Sinai, but relatively small and not official, certainly.
But the Israeli attitude is
no tolerance.
One missile, one rocket, no tolerance at all, because we'll look weak if we don't smash back.
And that's not going to, that attitude, that fundamental strategic vision looking out, what, if anything, changes that from that point of view?
Well, when they start dealing with the new authorities in Egypt and the shift in the temperature in the region, I think we're going to see the Israelis, they're not dumb.
No. I mean, given the fact where they are and where they've been surrounded by, who they've been surrounded by, excuse me.
They've been able to take it for granted that they could go on without serious challenge. And I think the challenges are going to be bigger.
And therefore they're going to have to respond to a changed geopolitical
Yeah.
environment.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Let's now talk about Israel, Iran. In a sense, the Egyptian situation and the Syrian situation has sort of masked, at least in terms of the media output, the sort of the existential crisis between Israel and Iran, with the nuclear weapons, and Iran sort of blowing it in the multilateral talks, if I can use the word blowing it, that I guess took place where? In Moscow, Baghdad, and somewhere else. That was the third one. Talk about that situation, the Israeli-Iran, Iran and the bomb situation.
Well, it looks like the sanctions that have been placed on Iran over the last few years and are getting tougher by the day. I think 1st of July, the sanctions on oil are supposed to really bite deeply.
Yep.
And I think the Iranians have sensed the sense that they're getting cornered on this, and they're looking for a way to get the message across. Better you come up with a political deal with us than try to corner us. And we're ready. We're ready. They've said that over the years, and
they're not.
What I said, well,
go ahead.
I'd take issue with that.
Go ahead.
At times they have been ready. At times we have been ready, but they've never been at the same times.
Really?
They when we moved into Iraq, they became ready for talk about a new approach to.
But we weren't going to talk.
Well,
because they were part of the axis of evil. Come on.
Yeah. And to be part of the axis of evil, you're such an outsider. We've got other business to finish, democratizing Iraq, for instance. And Iran was a troublemaker. It had no right, as of course, immediate neighbor in the region, to get involved. But
previous combatant over a multi-year war.
Yeah, that isn't the way Iran saw it. And of course, what we ended up doing was making a kind of free gift to Iran by upsetting the balance between the Sunni and Shia authorities in Iraq.
Right.
And all of a sudden...
And also a balance, I mean, a balance against Iran.
Yeah, well, it gave Iran opportunities it hadn't had under the former regimes in Iraq.
Let's talk about the sanctions. Let's talk about the logic of the sanctions. So you put the squeeze on it. The economy begins to erode. You know, the oil exports aren't there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the theory is you increase the pain on the population, and at some point the regime is responsive to the needs of the people and they make a change. Is that the logic? Because if that's the logic, history doesn't seem to bear that out.
Yeah. Sanctions are a slow and painful affair, and you cannot so target sanctions that you hit just the evil axis leading another country. No,
right.
You hit the people.
Right.
And
if the leadership doesn't care about the pain of the people, and clearly the Iranian government has shown its ability to act forcefully against its own population, as well as rigging elections, etc.
Well, this is one of the main arguments on the side of not attacking Iran.
Go ahead.
Because you will thereby ignite the spirit of patriotism and nationalism on the Iranian side, and they will end up as a people supporting a regime that they've gotten to cordially dislike because they're being attacked as a people.
What about the bomb? Talk about the impact of either having it, not having it, questing to have it. I mean, clearly, if Iran has the bomb, there is a logic in owning it, because don't attack me because I'll bomb you or one of your allies. So, I mean, you can almost see the imperative of getting the bomb.
They've got bombs on one side in Pakistan. They've got the Israeli atomic hardware on the other side. And, well, they've looked at North Korea and they've seen that a little country can sort of hold off major powers because it has the bomb and nobody wants to take a chance.
Sure.
With it. Okay. I don't take at face value those words of the Iranian president Ahmadinejad about Israel doesn't have any right to exist, let's get it wiped off the map.
Yeah, excuse me.
He just goes on at the mouth too long.
But I mean, come on.
But if I was an Israeli, I would have to be thinking twice.
More than twice.
Yeah. The fact is, they have a right to nuclear power. Even we admit that, peaceful power. We've had difficulty repeating that position as the debates have gone on over the last few years. But that's a right, an internationally granted right. They are members of the IAEA.
Right.
And we've got to find a way to engage with Iran on a broader set of topics than their nuclear power. Focusing on the nuclear has meant we keep running into a stone wall.
Okay, what do we talk about?
Oh, how about Syria? And here our own policies are tripping us up. We don't talk to Iran, a new contact group that includes Russia, Germany, France, America, the UK, the UN, but not Iran. Part of, it's the hangover of the axis of evil. They're troublemakers. But when you got trouble, you got to deal with the troublemakers.
Right. Okay.
Anyway.
Okay, talking about dealing with the troublemakers, let's go to another spot where you served as ambassador to Saudi Arabia. Again, we've got geopolitics, Saudi Arabia being a counterpoint, if you will, to Iran. Yeah. But at the same time, really the bulwark of religious and political conservatism. What's U.S. policy towards Saudi Arabia, and is it a wise one? Well,
they've been a good friend, a good partner on a number of occasions. They've been a reliable supplier of oil to the world economy. And the last thing we want is to see that capacity limited or manipulated to serve just the interest of the regime or totally politicized use of oil. They stood with us on Iraq, although they thought it could have been done by a commando raid instead of with thousands of troops. I thought, you know.
Thank you. No, we got it. I get it. I get it. Makes sense to me. Thank you. But hindsight can be 20/20. Sometimes it's not, but it could be.
Yeah, but they have got a strong concern about Iran,
right?
Which we share, but theirs goes back way into history.
No Arab Spring there though. That regime is tight. And in Bahrain, when there were protesters, they sent in their troops to make sure that their client state didn't move in anything away from them in a political sense.
Because in their lens, that trouble in Bahrain was fomented by Iran, working on the Shiites of Bahrain.
Well, I mean, that was almost the same argument that Assad's using, that all this is caused by terrorists. You know, it's always somebody else that's causing the problem. Okay, we've got, and again, we're in one of these 30-second modes. Okay. Iraq, it's still a mess. There's sectarian bombings every day. The government is corrupt. It virtually doesn't exist. You've got 15 seconds.
But one sign of progress is they're more inclined to negotiate, to complain, than to kill. There are still still the killers are out there, but the politicians are having more of a hearing and recognizing that they've got to work out their differences other than by brute force.
And you see this is actually occurring?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not as pessimistic as a lot of observers are that this is just going to, it's centrifugal. It's just going to fly apart, or descend into, the sectarian violence that it did at the height.
They're not clear of all their troubles yet, by any means, and they've got questions affecting the Kurds in the north. They've got questions between the two major communities of Arabs that they've got to keep sorting out. But there is more negotiation going on and more willingness to strike deals than I've seen.
Oh God, we can end on a positive, almost a positive note.
Not quite fully positive, but
a little bit.
A little bit.
Thank you. My thanks to Ambassador Richard Murphy for sharing his lucid analysis of the events in the Middle East. See you next week on CUNY TV. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.